when we were looking at the car, or when we were looking at the Mini Cooper, I'm going to go back to the Mini Cooper for a moment. We're in our onboard camera, and you'll recall that we talked about these green buttons, so I could move in and out from the view origin, which initially is always the same as the object origin, but the view origin can be manipulated from the origin settings dialog, which we did when we positioned our view behind the steering wheel. So in effect, we now have two origins associated with this object. One of them which influences the model itself and how it rotates around its center, and the other one which is connected to the model but can be independently positioned. And so the origin for our camera is now right behind the steering wheel, as we can see here. Well, the same is actually true of the camera. When you select a camera and you get this frame around here, the frame is to let you know that you are currently at the camera's origin point, which is conveniently placed right in the middle of the view here that it gives you. Now I could switch to origin settings, and if I look at origin settings, here's the symbolic representation of our camera. So this is the frame that we were looking through, and if I click on camera origin, well, it puts us right inside of it so that you can see that you're looking through something which is supposed to represent the camera. And in fact, you can come in here and you can manipulate your view just as you did before. For example, I could select the dolly tool and I could back up. I could select the orbit tool and I could change my view just like we did with the car. I'm just going to press cancel for now. So the point that I wanted to make is that you have a symbolic representation, this kind of open-ended rectangle, that lets you know when you first create it that you're actually looking, this gray border around here, you're looking through the camera. Now you can still use these green controls just like we did with the Mini Cooper or our Bryce character here, simply by sliding back. And you'll notice that when I do, I'm actually coming off center, and that's because this was not originally aligned right with it. So if I use this other green controller, I can change my orbit or my view around the view origin of the object, of the camera. Well, why would I want to do that? It's a good question. I mean, why would you normally want to create an offset and offset yourself from this this camera frame here? Well, you probably wouldn't. But there may be an occasion when you do. Maybe you want to actually demonstrate, you know, in your animation that here's where we're going to be making our point of view from. So you could maybe start off back over in a position like this, and you could say you'll put a camera right here, and then once you've actually explained that in your movie, then you could come right in and look through it, and you could actually animate that motion away from and back into the camera. But other than something like that, there probably really isn't any reason why you would want to have this frame here. So if you don't want the frame on your camera, if you look here, you have these buttons on the track layout, and you can, the first button here that has a little man-like symbol, if you click that, what it will do is it will hide the visual representation of the object. If I click there, it disappears. We're still looking through that camera. In fact, I can back off here a little bit, and I can click this, and as you can see, we still have our view from this camera. We're just not seeing its representation with that frame any longer. And you'll find that these same buttons work with all of them. So our Mini Cooper, if you look at the Mini Cooper down there, if I click this button, the Mini Cooper is hidden from view. And I could do that with the Raceway as well. By the same token, the button just to the right of that, if you think of the first button as a mute button in an audio program, if you've ever used any kind of audio software, maybe you've played around with GarageBand, you'll notice that you have the ability to mute a track. This is the same idea. You're muting the picture. And the button right next to it is the equivalent of a solo switch in an audio program, meaning that everything but the object that you've selected this button for will disappear. So we're on the camera right now. If I select this second button, everything but the camera is hidden from view. So these are just very convenient buttons. Here we're doing the same thing with the Mini Cooper. I've hidden everything but the Mini Cooper. Now I'm bringing it back. So those two buttons can be handy tools. Next to that, there's a lock button, and just like you would expect, if you click that button, it locks the object. Now you can't change anything about it. So if I
This track is locked.
Did you see what happened there? I tried to move it in, then I let go of the mouse.
This track is locked.
And it's popped back, and it told me that the track was locked. So that's what this is for, and you can lock any of the tracks you want, and then that way you can protect them from being moved. And then of course, like we saw with the Mini Cooper, this particular, well actually we haven't gotten to this yet. I'm going to save this one for later, but what it does is it will show us the animation path that you set for an object. And so once we get into animation, we'll come back to that. And this next button here, what it does is it gives you a kind of a transparent view of the object. So for example, looking at our Mini Cooper, if I select this button, I get sort of a transparent representation. So I can see I can now see the lines passing through it, the origin lines, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's handy, you want to do that just so you can look through an object, and that's how you could do it. And then this final button here, right now isn't doing anything. We'll look at that more later on when we start adding in some particle tracks. This plus sign here, what that is for adding a particle track, and we'll talk more about that in later movies, so we'll save that. So that's what these buttons are for, and the point that I originally wanted to make was that you can actually create an independent camera, as many of them as you want. In fact, let's create a second one right now, and I'll just hold it. This time we'll use our keyboard shortcut. I'll hold down Option, Command, and then I'll hit the letter C. And when I do that, it creates another camera, and this camera now was given the name of Camera 1. Our first camera was Camera, and our second camera was Camera 1. Now we're actually choosing between two separate cameras. They just were created at exactly the same location, which now leads me to a little more information about our Active Track controller.